Dame is number one.
Notre Dame with a miracle win as the clock
It's going
runs.
in. Notre Dame has scored.
We just spent the majority of the time talking about you.
Well, not the majority of the
A
time.
good portion of it, which I think is rightfully
Well-
so. And we kind of talked about it. I kind of alluded to it. You know, and Coach Kelly mentioned it. You know, having played on the defensive side of the ball, having that understanding of defenses, and also he talked about how to attack a defense in a more concise game plan focus. So do you bring that expertise, or do you use that very often when you're looking as an offensive coordinator? Your focus is how to attack this defense in a more precise way, not having a bunch of plays, but having more focused plays to attack their weaknesses.
Yeah, I think everybody's trying to do that on the offensive side of the ball. I think obviously the fact that I spent some time over there, there's certain advantages to everyone knows how a team lines up in cover 4, cover 2, or 3-4, 4-3. Some of the nuances of if we move our tight end this way, this is how they're going to react. So I've got a pretty good handle on where defenses will react when we move our pieces where we want to move them. So I think there's a little advantage to knowing that, hey, it's not that they're just in cover 2 here, but if we do this, the corner's going to do this, so now we can maybe take advantage of this in a certain area. So,
For those of us who have the privilege of going to practice, you are not quiet. You are very active, you are very clear, and at times you're very loud. And in a sense, you've almost switched roles a little bit from previous years with Coach Kelly, who may have been the loudest voice throughout the offensive side of the field. And he just talked about how that is actually a great positive for both of you. Can you touch on that a little bit?
yeah, well, I just think for him as a head coach and being as involved in the offense as he is, he shouldn't have to every day in practice have to coach every guy on our offense, even though he's still running the offense. He's still the head coach out there. He wants to know what Ishaq Williams is doing over there. He might be looking at the schemes we're on defensively or just seeing how we're running the ball. So hopefully I can take a little bit of pressure off him on a day-to-day basis, that he can actually step back occasionally and be a head coach, even though he's still 90% of his eyes are on us still, and he's still so in interact with players in a different mindset than always being the one that's correcting or teaching. Not that he still doesn't do it. You guys are out there, you see him correcting and teaching too. But if he knows the correcting and teaching is going on, he can occasionally take a deep breath and say, hey, looking at the big picture, today's practice really went good. And that was part of what we talked about as an offensive staff, but taking some of that pressure off Coach so that he could continue to keep more of an eye on the big picture and not always view it of how did the offense do today. And I think some of the times you address the team after the end of practice, he sees, yeah, maybe we didn't do as good, but Coach Diaco's boys were doing real good. But he has a little more perspective because he's not just purely focused on us every second of the practice.
Well, does it all come into play, him not being the heavy? Because sometimes if the head coach is constantly that voice, sometimes the players can kind of, they get the earmuffs on and don't quite hear him. It seems now, like I said, you talked about when you get on the offense, he can kind of come in and he says he speaks Chuck. So, and I think that's important, and you kind of alluded to it. Take some pressure off him, but he can be more of a focused on a specific thing he can watch. So can you talk about your relationship with Coach Kelly over the years, and that language barrier that's not there that may be there with some other coordinators or people that works under Coach Kelly?
Yeah, and there's a couple things. One, the long-standing relationship is one, and the fact that our brains in a lot of ways work the same. Our aggressive nature, our stubbornness, our belief in what we're doing, so we're seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. Then the second piece, it's funny because as I transitioned back to offense here at Notre Dame, and I've been really away from coach on offense for 8 years, and really I've never until now really actually been on the same side of it. I mean, I've been with coach before, but I've always been on the other side of the ball. And I'd be like, hey, even in the sprint, like, hey, coach, what do we call this? And it's the same thing called it in 03, or hey, how do we teach this? And I'm like, you still teach it the same way, don't you? So there's some of that too, is the beginnings, the seed, I can't, whatever the tree and the seed, there's some things, and there's some things that have completely changed. Yeah, we stopped doing that in 05, Okay, well, how we want to do it now. But there are still a lot more carryover than people would believe. And, he had a lot of successes, And so you change less when you've had more successes than when you're getting your butts kicked on offense. You change your offense every year. We've all seen that side of it too. So
I think right now people watching this all around the world, literally on UND.com, are saying you're a gregarious guy, you're fun to talk to, and I don't want to paint you completely as the heavy. In fact, an observer standing next to me at practice the other day said, boy, it would be great if we could run a tape of Chuck Martin's top 10 statements during practice this year. You are funny. We couldn't run some of them, but you are funny. Talk about the role of humor that you use in practice while dishing out instruction. You also temper it. It may be loud, but it's also amusing.
yeah, and again, we're all doing a job, but your personality comes out. It just, everybody's different out there. Coaches coach, and you have to coach your personality. One thing you learn as a young coach, don't try to be like him. You may learn a scheme from him, or learn, maybe how he speaks. Like, he taught it the same way, but he says it a little bit different. But at the end of the day, you got to be yourself. You can't all right, I'm going to be stoic like Tom Osborne was because he won a bunch of games. Well, that was his personality. That's not my personality. So everybody lets their personality. That's just who I am. And I want the kids, for me, to be believable, that they know, hey, I'm just a normal person out there. I'm one of them. Now, on the totem pole, they got to listen to me at certain times. At times, I'm going to be upset and I'm going to yell. A lot of times, I'm going to be happy yelling. And times, it's going to be a lighter. If I see something funny, we usually bring that was kind of stupid, wasn't it?
It's true even when you judge it. If I were one of your players, and thank God that I'm not, but if I were, I can tell at times.
Thank God, Notre Dame Nation said
yes,
that.
they're all saying that, and I agree. I am leading the choir on that one. But I mean, running back to the huddle, I would know you're yelling at me, but I'd take it a little better rather than try to close it off because it's funny. You're yelling at me, but you make a joke. I almost would remember that better. I mean, it's a style I haven't seen often, and personally, I like it. I mean, is that intentional or is that just you?
It's just me. It's always the way I've coached. I've always, there's a time to be serious. There's a time to give him a kick in the butt. There's a time to give him a pat in the back. And then sometimes, during long 24-period practice, sometimes a little levity gets us all realize, hey, we're playing football, we're coaching football. This can't be drudgery for 29 days of fall camp. It is. We know that, been through it. But it's a few moments a day where we take a step back and laugh about something that we see or somebody that something does, or just a different way to get the point across. Because sometimes, if it's always the same message, maybe for me a little sarcasm works at times, that they get the message. Maybe I said it in a funny way, but they actually got the point. Like, hey, I get what he's saying.
Well, as a coach, you're a teacher, and in that process, you have to learn how your players learn, and you give is something different for each one. Kind of talk about how that transcends from offense to defense, or defense to offense, and how do you get that across offensively when you're trying to cover that system and get that information across to not just the receivers, but the slot back, the offensive line, the center, each one having their own personality. How do you interject that lesson learned to where they're retaining it and then going out and actually executing it?
Yeah, and that's the building the relationships with your players and getting to know your players and kind of knowing what makes each kid tick. And some kid takes a hard coaching better. Some kid, you got to maneuver it a different way to get your point across, which what you're making, from being involved in it, that we're all wired differently, and some kids react one way. And it's the old days of my way or the highway. It's fewer and far between, because at the end of the day, we got to get our best players to perform at their highest level. We don't want just the best players that completely buy into my coaching style perform. I want every player to buy in, and maybe we've got to adapt to the kid. Now, there's sometimes you draw the line in the sand because, effort, focus, you got to do that. But getting your point across to an offensive lineman versus maybe a wide receiver, you get a point across a little different way, but you still got to get it across.
Coach, I can feel the vibes right now from everybody watching. When are they going to ask him about the quarterbacks? When are they going to ask him about the quarterbacks? Given that no decision's been made yet, you've been working very closely with the quarterbacks, but just give us an update through your eyes of how that competition is going right now.
I would say it's going very well. I would say we are very pleased with their progress, and it's been definitely, initially it was one step forward, two steps back, and then I think we got to 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and now we're getting some stretches where we're taking a lot of steps forward before we take a step back within the practice. I think we're very pleased with the talent level of our quarterback crew. I think they're settling in and really understanding our offense now. And you really don't know what you got until a guy settled in and understands it. Everybody looks bad when they're maybe confused or maybe have too high anxiety. Maybe they understand it, but the lights go on and we're still finding that when we get off to the sidelines and do just, we do a lot of 11-on-11 where we're standing behind them. It's like the security blanket. Even though we're not telling them what to do, we're just standing back there very close, and there's just a comfort level that then all of a sudden,
say, hey,
all of a
coach.
sudden you walk out there and there's not even your teammates behind you. They're all on the sidelines. It's just you, and we're still working through that process, and a lot of that's game experience. You really don't know how a guy's going to react in a game until you put him in a game. He can be lights out in practice and go the other way come when the bright lights of Broadway go on. Then you have other kids that kind of you're not sure about, and the lights go on, and
Boom.
they start playing at a different level. So, but I think they're comfortable, and we're seeing the talent of the Gunnar Kiel, the talent of the Andrew Hendricks, the talent of the Everett Golson, then obviously Tommy with the reps we're giving him. I think he's feeling more comfortable too. So I think there's no doubt the material's there. I really think there's 4 guys that can help Notre Dame win football games. Obviously, it's not going to get to the point we play 4 guys, but I was after spring, I was like, I hope we have 1. Now I really believe we got 4 that can do it at this level, and only time will take out. Some days, one guy's a little bit better than the other guy. Some days, you come off the field like he's our guy. Then the next day, you're like, no, that was our guy. And even within the practice, you're like, he's getting it. He's going to be the guy. And then you're like, no, maybe it's him.
So does
that's
that mean
where we're at?
Even if somebody starts to step up over the course of the next 2 weeks, you have to make sure that at least 2 guys are equally ready to play in that first game because of what you just said.
And it may not be equally ready, but you obviously you're going to have 2 guys prepared for the opener, no doubt. And then you're going to see somebody go out there really, Andrew has some playing experience. He never trotted out there with first group. He's been in a role or a package and has done some nice things, but he's never
been the
out there and
guy.
led the team. So however the way it falls, you're really going to have a first game starter. And then everybody thinks, well, you're going to have it figured out. No, we're going to see how he plays. Like the guy's going to have to go out and perform in Dublin, Ireland, in a foreign country, in a crazy environment. So you can practice all you want. Anybody that's ever played or coached knows that. We'll see. And somebody may get the first opportunity to take it and run with it, and you never look back. But if not, then you got to be willing to say, who's the next guy in line?
Well, in talking about that, in particular quarterback position, and Coach Kelly talked about in his press conference, all that's placed upon that position and how important it is. And we were talking about it, how to get them to that point little at a time. How do you keep a player from when they have a bad week or a bad 2 days of practice? How do you get them back to say, okay, here are the good things that you did, and keep that positive momentum once you get them to that 2-step forward?
Yeah. And for us, it's a bad play. We don't let it go past that. We're going to correct a bad play, and sometimes we may correct it pretty vocally, and we voice our displeasure. Other times we may correct in more of a classroom teacher setting because it's something we know that it was kind of a new look and they don't really have it yet, so we're going to explain. But then we immediately refocus them on the next play. So it never goes to where they're having a bad week or a bad day or even a bad period. It's a bad play. We're going to correct it on however we deem we need to correct it. And then the last thing before we let him turn around and go play the next play is make sure he's that's gone. That opportunity was gone. Whether you learn from it or not, this is the next play, focus on the next play. And if they have bad body language or they have bad vocal, we don't move on. We're not moving on with a bounce. We're going to have a bounce ourselves. We're going to be positive. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to clear it. So even though at times we're pretty crazy out there, and we always refocus them right before we get them back out there.
And speaking of being positive, I was at practice this morning, and something I've noticed, and Reggie said, because it's not the grind of being down at Culver or something what Lou used to do and keep you in dorms and it's 100 degrees, but you've got 3 days of 2-a-days this week. Almost every summer I've been around over the last 31 years, some of the players have started to talk about, man, it's a grind, but we're getting through it. I have not heard that once this year, and you're using all 29 of your practices, which is the first time you guys have done that as a staff here. What do you think it is about this team where they haven't hit the wall yet, which they usually hit right about now in training camp?
I think a lot of it's year 3 and the progression of everybody being comfortable with everybody, players and coaches alike, and coach getting it set, his organization set the way he thinks it needs to be set to win, and the players being a lot more comfortable with what the expectations are and how things can go. And then I think a lot of it is the players' own personal expectations. They've had a great offseason, and they're excited to go play football and see how good they be. So a lot of it just has to do with them and their own expectations for their own. They're not They're looking forward to playing season. They're looking forward to learning. They know we got a ways to go. They're looking forward to getting those meetings and get the corrections and go get them corrected. It's not a group that, oh, we're going to get through this. It's just we're fortunate. I told them a few days ago, all the days run together, but just it's so much fun to come to practice with that because you guys want to know. You want to learn. You want to fight. You want to scratch. You want to claw. And, yeah, we're making mistakes that got to get corrected or they're going to cost us football games, but you're more than willing to try to figure out what those are and get them corrected.
When kind of speaking along that line, how do you get the kids to, what is the trust level like with a new quarterback? And you kind of talked about you really don't know until they're in the game and they're in the moment. How is it for the other players on offense from a trust level? Because I know that's a real important part of, hey, I have to be able to trust this guy, the guy next to me. How are the players encouraging those quarterbacks and, hey, we got your back?
Right, and that's so important, as you know. And we had our first couple of days, we had a few instances like, what's going on back there? You know, you got a couple of veteran players at all positions that know how it should be run, and it's not getting run that way. Yeah. You know, certain, and we just kind of said right away, here's the deal: they're inexperienced, they're young. They don't know. Let's not con ourselves. They don't know. They're learning. A lot of times, every snap, they're learning. And, you know, defense is installing stuff, and we're installing stuff. And so they need your help. You know, they got a lot of things on their plate, and they're young, and they're learning, and they're fighting like crazy. But I got it. I got it. They didn't check it right. I got it. He forgot to give you the cadence, you know. The old linemen like to know the dang cadence, you know. I got it. But just understand, you guys have started some games. Hey, let's help them out. Let's support it. And they've done a great job of when we've had those blips like, hey, don't worry about we're going to play the next play, which is always what we talk about, but our kids are doing a good job doing it.
Coach said in his press conference when asked about Everett and Andrew right now, if it's neck and neck, right down to right before the game, intangibles will be taken into account. How much do you take into account the guy that seems to have the attention of the team, the guy the team thinks should be the guy? Now, I'm not asking if you poll them, but sometimes it just looks like they may follow one guy more than the other. Is that ever a factor?
Well, I just think it's a factor winning the job because we know you're hitting the nail on the head with the quarterback position. Part of it is being able to perform, and then part of it is being a leader. When you go out there, you have to manage our offense. We can't yell from the sidelines what needs to happen. And, yeah, we're going to try to cover as many scenarios as we can, but we all know from the game of football there's going to be something on Saturday that comes up that and then how you manage that play or that situation is going to affect the outcome of the whole team. So to me, it's just part of winning the job that we're always looking and preaching, and you can't run before you walk, because first thing is you got to figure out what you're doing, and then you start to learn how to manage those situations. And we're just starting to get the point. Coaches put them in a lot of team situations for that very reason. We've done more team than we've ever done. Really, and not that it's not benefiting the other positions, because everybody needs that 11-on-11 football, but it's really benefiting our quarterbacks, just exposing them to as many situations that he knows they haven't been exposed to. And we don't want to expose them to them week 4. We're trying to hit as many without running our team down as we can, so that's been huge for those kids.
Chuck, terrific. Thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it.